This plant is a common weed in most of the tropical world. But when properly processed, it will yield indigo blue, one of the world's oldest and most enduring colors. This particular species bears the scientific name Indigofera tinctoria, and it is a vital component in achieving all ranges of blues, greens, purples, and blacks. To this day, indigo inspires passion and curiosity, not just in those who would use it to color cloth, but also in artists, historians, anthropologists, and chemists, those who would know its part in the rise and fall of empire, and those who are drawn to the magic of its transformative properties. Jenny Balfour-Paul has spent over 20 years researching and documenting indigo use throughout the world. She has produced what is considered by many to be the definitive book on this wide-ranging subject. Published in 1998 by the British Museum Press, it is simply titled Indigo.
People sometimes ask me why I'm studying indigo and not the other dyes, which is a valid question. And I mean, all the natural dyes are fascinating. But the others are, there's all the yellows, which almost any plant gives a yellow. And the reds you can get from plants and from insects and so on, lots of different sources for red. But blue, the other great primary colour, there's only one natural blue dye in the world, and that is indigo. The other thing is the colour is incredible. I mean, it's a most beautiful colour, indigo blue, in all its shades. And the other thing is the whole processing of it is very magical and unique because of its extraordinary chemistry. There's nothing like it. It's really bizarre, and all these stories are grown up because of that. And it's got the most incredible history. And it's the world's oldest dye, probably of all. And it's the only dye that will dye all fibres. It's truly universal. Even though I'm biased, I think everybody would agree that indigo is absolutely unique and magical.
Dawn breaks on the indigo farm of Palu Pitchi Reddy. Before the intense heat of the day can steal moisture from the leaves, the indigo plants are harvested. To make dye, the mature plants must be harvested within 10 days. With indigo, timing is everything. If the plants are not collected at the correct time, the yield will be poor and the color will not be true. The plants are cut above the lowest joint. The same plants will produce 2 crops per year. Some plants are allowed to go to seed in order to supply the next year's crop. The harvest time is a sensitive one. As Pitchi Reddy puts it, this is a time-consuming process, and we have to supervise everything when we make the dye. These 10 days are like overseeing a marriage. We can't leave the house.
Beat up, beat up! Hey!
Before the processing of the crops begin, Pitchi Reddy prepares a puja, an offering and prayer to ensure that all goes well. As recently as 1908, there were over 30,000 acres of land in active indigo production in this part of India. Today, the Pitchi Reddy farm is one of few that remain. Even though he is one of the largest cultivators of indigo on the subcontinent, his farm is a mere 50 acres, and the principal crop is not indigo, but rice. When Europeans arrived on the shores of India, indigo became a valuable cargo. For centuries, the trade was competitive between the Portuguese, Dutch, English, and French, and indigo plants were exported to plantations in colonial centers. When the British lost control of the American colonies, it sought to secure a supply of indigo by establishing large production farms at Bengal and Bihar. Extensive plots of land were taken over by the British, who leased them back to peasant workers. The demand for indigo production, to the exclusion of food crops, led directly to the Bengal famine, in which 1/6 of the population died.
So throughout the 19th century, it was a huge trade from northern India. The British made, there were 4,000 tons a year coming in from Calcutta in its heyday. If you think how much indigo is needed to dye everything, it's quite extraordinary. Masses, tons and tons of indigo is needed in Europe to dye everything from policemen's uniforms, all the army uniforms that were blue. Some of you had the red jackets, but anything blue was indigo. The colour navy blue is indigo blue. It's synonymous. Anything that was blue before 1900 was indigo.
Conditions on the British plantations were harsh, and to this day, the mention of natural indigo production horrifies some with long memories.
छोटा चला लगा हाँ 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 देखो यार देखो निलेगा
Here on the Pitchi Reddy farm, the indigo vat works by natural fermentation. The plants are covered with water. Nothing else is added. Gosper is the supervisor for the extraction process. Gosper will follow all aspects of production. He can tell by scent, feel, and experience when the vat is ready to give the very best blue. For centuries, those who supervised indigo production kept their secrets closely guarded. This secrecy, combined with the fact that skills were passed down orally, has meant that there are few individuals who still possess traditional knowledge. After a number of hours, the vat begins to whisper. The process of extracting and then dyeing with indigo depends upon the presence or absence of oxygen. On the surface, where the mixture is in contact with the air, a characteristic blue froth appears. Inside the vat, where there is an absence of oxygen, the mixture will be a yellow-green. Jenny Balfour-Paul explains the process.
Unlike all the other dyes, where you can see the colour straight away, cochineal insect is red or whatever, with indigo, the colour itself is totally invisible. You simply don't know it's in the plant. That's one of the things that makes indigo so extraordinary and the process so magical and also complicated, why it was a specialised dye. So you have your indigo leaf, whether it's woad or one of the tropical indigo plants. In this leaf is the indigo in its invisible form, attached to a glucose. So you soak the leaf, and by soaking it, the glucose splits off. You can take the leaves out once they've been soaked because the liquid contains by then the indigo white, which is what you want, or the invisible indigo.
Oh, got it.
The supervisor removes the plug. The water, containing the indigo white, or dissolved indigo, flows into a second tank. The supervisor checks the results and tells how many kilograms can be expected from this batch. In order to change the dissolved indigo white into indigo powder, it is necessary to add oxygen. This is done by whisking the vat with special paddles. The water will change from a yellow-green to a deep blue as the indigo precipitate forms. Once again, the supervisor must decide when the process is complete. Stopping too soon or whisking too long will both have adverse effects on either the color or the volume. The indigo settles to the bottom of the tank as a blue sludge. The supervisor unplugs the second tank to allow the excess water to drain off. The spent indigo plants will be used to fertilize the rice crop. The plants are rich in nitrogen and, after being soaked in water for so long, will make an excellent compost. The excess water is drained into a third tank. It is also rich in nitrogen and will be used to water the crops. Here we see Pitchi Reddy with his father Noorjehan Reddy as they inspect the drained vat. Pitchi Reddy shares his father's enthusiasm and is proud that he oversees the production of some of the finest natural indigo in the world. He says proudly, "We have Japanese buyers who come every year for the indigo cakes that we produce." The precipitate that remains in the vats is a watery clay. It is a precious liquid, and every attempt is made to collect as much of it as possible. The indigo is transferred to a large pot and boiled. Water evaporates as steam. The cooking process also sterilizes the indigo and prevents further fermentation. Producing indigo is much like making wine. Both products are achieved through a fermentation process, and as with wine, judging the ripeness of each step is crucial. An expert can judge how the finished product will be affected by such variables as local weather and soil. The indigo supervisor can tell which part of the field will give the best dye.
Madam, come here.
Okay.
The hot liquid is strained through a coarse cloth to remove impurities. Finally, it is squeezed in a screw press and formed into cakes. Even though there is evidence that people knew how to dye with indigo roughly 5,000 years ago, European nations did not come to a full understanding for quite some time. As recently as 1705, a patent was filed in Germany seeking to mine indigo, mistakenly thinking that it was a type of mineral. The Pitchi Reddy farm is a successful indigo plantation. Even so, it is not without challenges. Many of Pitchi Reddy's relatives have moved to large urban centers to work in the more attractive fields of information technology. One of his brother-in-laws works for Microsoft in Atlanta, Georgia. All over India, the large urban centers exert a strong influence on the young. The final drying will still take a number of days. It must dry slowly, otherwise the cakes will crack. The world is in flux. Traditional knowledge, even traditional knowledge which has existed for thousands of years, can be lost within a generation. Recently, this appeared to be the case with traditional Ajrakh cloth dyed with natural indigo. An Ajrakh is a cloth which has been specially prepared and then block printed through an elaborate process. Production involves washing and scouring the cloth several times. It is then prepared to receive the dye through immersion in a watery mixture of dried lemon, tamarind, molasses, and oil. The colors of most importance to Ajrakh are indigo blue and madder red. Noorjehan Bilgrami describes this traditional cloth in her book, Ajrakh.
The people remembered as something because blue was so important, it's part of the culture. And Ajrakh, again, it's all about blue, which is indigo, and madder, the red, and the stars. The white are the stars, which they say, so the blue is the heaven or the sky, and the white are the stars, and therefore the more twinkling, the more clearer the white stars ought to be, is something that the Ajrakh printers talk about.
The Ajrakh name derives from Ajrakh, which means blue in Arabic and Persian. A couplet from Diwan-e-Hafez reads, "A person often feels ill at ease without an Ajrakh. For a man, it is an all-purpose cloth. It is used as a turban, a cummerbund, and a shoulder cloth. Women use it as a dupatta or chadar, as a shawl, and sometimes it is converted into a hammock for a child, slung from the trees. It is very commonly spread on the beds as a bed sheet and coverlet. Ajraks are produced in family-sized craft houses run by a master craftsman, or usto. At its height, the culture of Ajrak production was a network of trades concerned with the manufacture of wooden blocks, raw cloth, natural dyes, and of course, the Ajraks themselves. Noorjehan, who saw Ajrakh cloth slowly disappearing from the markets, took up the challenge of documenting traditional Ajrak production and compiling portraits of master craftspeople. She comments on the loss of natural indigo dye knowledge.
So it was really this amazing thing that within a period of 90 years, the knowledge had completely disappeared. And in actuality, just about 50 years, that the production of indigo had also been reduced to 1 or 2 people. And as I started finding out more and more about the historical aspect of indigo, it sort of led back to the period 3,500 to 4,000 to 5,000 years back. In fact, now the archaeologists are they are working, and it could be dated back as far back as 5,000 to 6,000 years ago in this region. So it's so tragic to know that there is, this knowledge is gone.
The decline of Ajrak is due in part to the availability of inexpensive screen-printed imitations. But a key factor is also the disappearance of natural indigo, forcing block printers to import the more expensive synthetic variety. Noorjehan decided that her own block printing studio, Kwon, would convert to the use of natural indigo. In an effort to achieve this, and to reconnect local textile artisans with the control and production of their materials, the Miani Sindh Research and Development Project began in southern Pakistan in 1998. At one time, the tropical indigo plant, Indigo fera, was common along the banks of the Indus River. A short growing period allowed it to reach maturity and be gathered between flooding. Recent climatic change and persistent drought, however, have meant that the plant is no longer naturalized. The plants are weighed. It takes 200 kilos of indigo leaves to yield 1 kilo of indigo powder. A few acres of plantation, yielding roughly 3 kilograms per acre, could supply enough indigo to support an artisan for the entire year. Localizing production of indigo in this way would have a stabilizing effect on both the economy and cultural heritage. Here the plants are weighted down to keep them submerged as they ferment. As with the Pitchi Reddy farm, this vat is a natural fermentation, achieved simply by covering the plants with water. The vats are left for about 14 hours. They are checked periodically in order to catch the indigo as it begins to sing. Just after 2:30 a.m., the indigo has started to whisper. Small bubbles appear and the characteristic foam, or indigo flower, begins to form. The Miani project seeks to provide a system whereby an individual can grow and process his crop without a prohibitive investment in agricultural machinery or irrigation systems. At 6 o'clock, the men start to take the leaves out of the well. They use an ingenious paddle and pulley system to introduce oxygen into the vat. The experience is timeless and could perhaps have occurred in this very forest thousands of years ago. They will whisk the liquid until it changes color. When the whisking is complete, the liquid is drained into the second well and left to settle for about 2 hours. The excess water from the vat is drained off and a sand trough is created. A fine weave white cotton cloth is laid over the trough and the water from the second well is poured through it. The water seeps through and evaporates, leaving the indigo precipitate. The indigo is scraped off and mixed with a small amount of oil to be dried and formed into balls. With the exception of the European woad, most plants that yield indigo dye are referred to simply as indigo plants. Yet different regions will often utilize completely different species of plant. The word indigo is derived from the Greek indikon and the Latin indicum, both of which mean a substance obtained from India. Indigofera tinctoria is the shrub which is processed at both the Pitchi Reddy farm and at the Miani research project. Other species of plants, however, also contain precursors of indigo in their leaves. Some can be used to dye cloth directly without the necessity of extracting the dye stuff first. One such plant is Strobilanthes flaccidifolus, found in northeastern India. It grows abundantly in the teak jungle surrounding the village of Entema in the annexed state of Nagaland. Rani, a most enthusiastic guide, gives a demonstration by naturally dyeing some cotton that she has spun. The leaves are broken by hand and mixed with warm water. Here, much effort is being expended to relearn the process of direct dyeing, which was once practiced fluently. The abundance of the local indigo plants is a reminder that it isn't the indigo which is disappearing, but the knowledge and the memory of its use. With the influx of mass-produced items, synthetic dyes, and synthetic pre-dyed yarn, the individual artisan is hard-pressed to compete. In the local marketplace, Western clothing has replaced traditional dress. The few finished pieces of indigo-dyed cotton present in the village are heirlooms, probably 3 or 4 generations past, carefully stored as reminders. Yet for some members of this community, a sense of identity is still associated with the skilled use of the indigenous plants. A revival is underway. Rani's hands are blue. Once the leaves and the yarn have been mixed thoroughly, she adds ash water. This creates the alkaline environment necessary for the indigo to dissolve. The yarn is removed and transferred to a pot with more leaves and water. This is brought to a boil, achieving a rich, saturated color through a very simple process. Another species of indigo plant that can be used for direct dyeing is Marsdinia tinctoria. Here, in the small village of Ban Nong Thatai, in the Vientiane district of Laos, Bovan Pumin is preparing solutions of natural indigo. When judging the condition of the solution, she employs all her senses. She will touch, smell, taste, and listen to the vat, judging exactly how the vat needs to be altered to produce the color she's after. Her workshop is impeccable. All tools and objects seem to magically coordinate themselves in the production of indigo. She appears to be part of the process herself, dressed from head to toe in blue. Her skill is considerable, for as with any complex recipe involving natural processes, there are many ways the vat could go wrong.
A lot of the stories to do with indigo usually are to do with its fertility, because it's a dye that needs to be fed and kept going. Therefore, it is like making bread or something. It's alive, or making beer. And you're feeding, in fact, what's usually called the indigo gods, the spirits in the dye vat. And because of that, it can easily go wrong if you don't put enough sweetness in, the vat isn't alkaline enough. Of course, it's to do with the chemistry. But, I mean, in the old days, when you've got a fermentation vat in your village and it's going wrong, you've got to blame somebody. So who do you blame? It's a time-honoured thing. The women, always. And because it seems to be like a fertile vat, then it's associated with fertility, obviously. And therefore, the blame is usually put on fertile women. So in many countries of the world, well, sometimes you'll get women past childbearing age are the only ones who can make the indigo vat. Now, a woman who says, if a woman who's pregnant comes near the vat, that's very dangerous, because either that pregnant woman is very super fertile, will steal the fertility for the dye vat, and the dye vat will die out, it won't work anymore, or conversely, the dye vat will pinch the fertility from the woman to have more fertility. So it's dangerous from both points of view. So, I mean, very often, it's usually women who've been blamed in one way or another when things go wrong, which is absolutely typical, isn't it? And there's an awful lot of stories to do with indigo and death. Sometimes, if there's been a nasty person who's died, and the spirit is troubling the village, you'll pour the contents of an indigo vat over somebody's grave to suppress that malevolent spirit. Or conversely, in Morocco, if an indigo vat isn't working, the women will go around the village telling lies. You tell the lie, and it's a black lie, an indigo lie. And by telling the lie, the indigo vat gets going again. So people will go around and say, oh, the women are lying, that means there's a failed indigo vat. So instead of a white lie, you're telling a blue lie. So there's so many extraordinary stories like that. It's all to do with the fact that chemistry is difficult and it's mysterious, and it's, you know, it's blue and then it's not blue, and you've got to look after it. And you know, it is a very strange thing to work with. And also, it's done by specialists, so people don't understand it. It's not Any woman can pick a plant and make a yellow colour. But the indigo dyers are specialists, they keep their secrets. So the whole thing has become secretive, a bit mysterious. I say it's got this smell. Does it smell like death? It's fertile. Is it like fertile women? And this is how all these myths have come about. I don't think most people realise that the whole legend of Bluebeard actually comes from the habit of dyeing beards with indigo. And that goes right back to pre-Islamic times. The armies of King Darius, so it's said, stained their beards blue with indigo. Funnily enough, so did the ancient Britons were supposed to cover themselves with woad for the same reason, to frighten off Julius Caesar. So the armies of Darius stained all, because if you use indigo, you get your lovely black beards and everything. And that was to frighten off the enemy. And that went on into Islamic times, and it's still an Islamic thing now. On the whole, you don't see much grey hair in the Arab world. People either stain it with henna, or it's still with indigo. You can see it in the Pakistani shops and things. You can see this dye. It's called wasma. It's the Arabic for indigo.
Yelapa Kaka dyes cotton and silk for local hand weavers. He is a master, consistently producing deep, clear tones. His pots are buried to stabilize temperature and to make access to the openings convenient. The pots are actually quite large and deep, but with tiny openings designed to minimize contact with the air. The process of making a dye vat is the reverse of the process by which indigo is extracted from the plant.
To dye with it, you have to convert it into its non-blue form again, believe it or not. So you have to go back through that chemical process. In this case, you have an alkali medium, quite high alkalinity, made with urine or ash or lime or something. You crush up your indigo, and then you add something to feed the bacteria, whether it's dog's turds or whether it's dates or rice wine or something. Usually it's nice, sweet things. Occasionally it's nasty things. Bad meat or something. This feeds the bacteria, as it were, eat up. It's not quite like that, but they get in contact with the indigo blue. They convert it back into its indigo white again. The dye vat is then a sort of funny yellowy colour, no blue there. You put your cloth in, and when you take it out, your cloth looks a yellowy, greeny, nothing colour, and the oxygen hits the cloth, and it's completely magical. That's why there's so many stories about indigo, because nobody would understand this chemistry in the past. We only know it now. It's still magical today. So the oxygen hits the cloth and it turns magically in a few minutes from this yellowy, greeny colour into this wonderful indigo blue that we all love so much.
His vats are all natural fermentation vats, maintained with water, mealy wheat, ash water, and indigo from the Pitchi Reddy farm. The fermentation provides the alkaline environment necessary to dye various fibers. This alkaline environment can also be achieved through the addition of chemicals rather than through natural fermentation.
एक बार मछलीपट्टनम जाओ मुखर्जी के नहीं छोड़ते और प्रिंट ऑफ ब्लैक प्रिंट.
The carpets of Turkey comprise some of the world's greatest textiles. For hundreds of years, they were skillfully woven with naturally dyed wool. Traditional patterns and dye techniques were passed on from one generation to the next. Yet by the mid-1970s, the availability of synthetic dyes and fibers had displaced traditional techniques and materials to the point where the knowledge of natural dye use had been lost in many villages.
It's going with indigo, but even synthetic indigo, there are other dye ingredients, and they are...
As natural dye techniques were vanishing, Harald Böhmer, a German scientist with a keen interest in dye chemistry, completed research into the chemical composition of natural dyes used in Anatolian rugs. In 1981, he was able to return to several villages and share the knowledge which he had collected. Simple recipes for natural dye use were photocopied and distributed to the villages. The measurement of ingredients was based on the ubiquitous tulip-shaped Turkish teacup, a common item in even the most humble tent.
And this is something what we use too, that is carpenter's glue, that has the chemical function of a buffer.
Here, Dr. Böhmer shows the ingredients needed for the indigo dye pot. The recipe includes carpenter's glue. It acts as a buffer to stabilize the pH of the vat so that the alkaline solution does not harm the wool.
Sodium hydroxide. But this is carpenter's glue, it's not that dangerous for the wool. Pitchi Reddy. And now, the last one is...
Now you have to see the color there.
Indigo. And you see immediately it changes to yellow.
Shortly after Dr. Böhmer's visit, a number of groups combined efforts to help support artisan cooperatives, and the Dough Bag project was started. The Dough Bag acronym can be translated as Natural Dye Research and Development Project. The project has as its guiding principles the use of hand-spun Turkish wool for the warp, weft, and pile, the production of authentic Turkish designs, the use of natural dyes with no unhealthy mordants or chemical wash. The work is to be done in the home, not in factories or studios. Carpets bear a distinct leather tag identifying them as being produced by members of the Dough Bag project. Members are thus assured a good return on their investment in natural techniques and patterns. The indigo wool begins to oxidize when lifted out of the pot. The color slowly transforms into a rich, clear blue.
In the beginning, we used this light blue because it put the cost down. But then we found out the carpet is light blue.
Here, weld is added to another pot being heated nearby in preparation to overdye the indigo wool.
miktar olarak %70. Evet, 70. For 1 kilo wool,
The indigo wool is added directly into the pot amongst all the plant matter. Plant matter will later be picked free.
maybe that
The wool quickly begins to achieve the desired shade of green, and after about 10 or 15 minutes, it's ready. On the Indonesian islands of Sumba and Flores, artisans still prepare traditional storytelling cloths by the ancient and time-consuming method known as ikat. Ikat is a form of tie-dye, where either the warp or the weft threads are tied with strips of palm frond. The tape forms a physical resist. Threads which have been tied will not receive any color when immersed in dye. Additional tapes are added as the process continues, and the technique may need to be repeated several times for a detailed or multicolored pattern. A variety of hues can be derived from just 2 colors, depending upon how often the fabric is dipped. In eastern Sumba, the bark of the kombu tree is used to give a brown shade. In West Sumba, the color from the indigo plant is preferred. After the fibers have been dyed, they are woven on a loom. The clarity of the pattern is entirely dependent on the registration of the threads. When finished, 2 long pieces of ikat will be sewn together to form a single large rectangular cloth. Indigofera sumatrana, yet another variety of the indigo plant, grows wild in eastern Sumba, and in some regions it is cultivated. For the Sumbanese, indigo dye is surrounded by perils, and the transformative nature of indigo makes its use a form of alchemy. Indigo and its liquids often evoke feminine body fluids, and the moral symbolism associated with them. In eastern Sumba, it is still the case that indigo dyeing is almost exclusively the province of women past childbearing age. Fabrics dyed with natural indigo are more expensive than those dyed with synthetic indigo, as the production of natural indigo entails the sacrifice of a pig. Highly detailed and elaborate works are traditionally used in festivals and to wrap around the dead. Sumbanese ikat have long been sought after by visitors to the island. An inferior type of cloth has evolved to meet the demand for relatively inexpensive souvenirs. Locals view this type of cloth with great disdain. Quite literally, they would not be caught dead in one. The most frequent motifs used on Sumbanese fabric are animals: birds, snakes, stags, and crayfish. The tree of life is also a recurrent pattern. The skull tree motif, seen often, dates from headhunting days, when skulls were hung on the branches of a tree in the village centre. This tree ensured fertility and was the main religious object of the village. Traditional storytelling cloths also document important events, a battle or the life of a royal family. Such cloths are important during the festival of prayer, when sacrifices and myth narration open the planting season. The popularity of ikat has also led to a shift in roles traditionally defined by gender and caste. Women entrepreneurs and artisans, unwilling to give up control of their designs and equally unwilling to settle for low prices from local shops, have begun to market and distribute their own work. This has led to gossip and resentment, as well as admiration and emulation. Whatever the reaction, it demonstrates the ability of locally produced craft to sustain a viable way of life, one that need not forsake tradition or the rural setting of the village. On the Indonesian island of Java, in the city of Yogyakarta, is the batik Winotosastro. Here, traditional batik processes are used to create elaborate and detailed patterns on cloth. A janting tool, a tiny copper bowl with a wooden handle and spout, is used to apply hot wax to the fabric. The wax will act as a resist to block the dye. Resists can also be applied with a jap, a form of metal block which is dipped in hot wax and stamped on the cloth. Cool wax will crack very easily, and traditional Indonesian batik places a high value on clear lines and areas of color with no cracks. For this reason, special mechanisms have developed to dye fabric without crumpling the cloth. This setup has the additional advantage of permitting several yards of cloth to be dyed with little or no back pain. In early September of 2000, batik artists, designers, academics, gallery owners, collectors, and enthusiasts gathered in Yogyakarta for a 5-day batik festival. The festival had as its focus a competition based on the use of natural dyes. For proponents of natural dye use, the competition was a very important event, as it brought the issue of natural versus synthetic dye use to the attention of gallery owners and the purchasing public. In the Kutch Desert of western India lies the village of Dhamadka. The village is widely known for its masterfully printed ajraks. Built on generations of skill, the Dhamadka legacy relies on indigo blue. The core family of 3 brothers, with the help of children in the village, are responsible for some of the finest hand-printed ajraks in existence. The Ajrakh cloth, having already been printed with resist, is dipped into the vat. In Dhamadka, the natural indigo is purchased locally in the form of a dried cake. It is also obtained from the Pitchi Reddy farm when it is used to dye cloth for one of their largest clients, Mewa Handprints, based in Vancouver, Canada. The earthquake that hit the area in January of 2001 devastated the village, which was situated at its epicenter. The village of Dhamadka was forced to move on to a new location where they had to rebuild everything. For the dye works, this meant they had to adjust recipes to account for such variables as the shifted mineral content of the water. It was difficult work, but unlike many, they had their artistry as a familiar constant. Today, the production of Ajrakh cloth in the village of Dhamadka continues. It is an active and thriving business. Dhamadka is part of a natural dyeing revival.